Matthews here. We're going to be talking about the shifters of supply, the shifters of demand, and what they look like on a graph. So there's four shifters of supply. There's input prices, technology, expectations, and number of sellers. Input prices are, well, for my company is Martin, so it would be like wood, steel for the frets, or steel for the strings, or plastics for the picks, nuts, bridges, and whatnot. So if the prices for let's say steel for the frets goes up and they can no longer afford frets entirely, no longer afford the steel, they will probably stop making that type of neck. I mean, they literally can't make it anymore because they can't afford it. If it just goes up a little bit, the supply will go down because they can't make as many, because they can't afford to make as many. But if the price goes down for the steel, it'll allow the supply to go up because they'll have more steel available because they can purchase more to make frets, strings, and whatnot. The second shifter is technology. So, for example, in the 19th century, when Martin first started, they used hammers to insert frets into the neck. But in the early 1920s, early 1930s, they introduced this machine called a fret press, and it's essentially just this giant press that you put the guitar neck in here, and you turn a lever, and the press pushes down on the frets, creating an even push into the neck, keeping them in place, which made it a lot faster to produce and a lot cheaper because they didn't have to pay for so much labor. So this will have an increase in the supply because you can make it faster. The third shifter is expectations. Let's say that, let's just use COVID as an example, because there was a huge surge in people home and not having things to do, so they bought a ton of guitars from Fender. But let's say that it's Martin for this example. Let's say that Martin had a ton of beginner guitars that they had just produced in January, and COVID didn't hit till March. So, and if let's say that for some reason they knew that COVID was going to hit and there was going to be this surge, they would keep them in storage, these beginner guitars, and wait until the surge hits and then put them out into the market so that they make the maximum amount of profit, and that would increase the supply later, but it would decrease it at the time when they kept them in storage. The fourth shifter is the number of sellers, which if there's more sellers, there's going to be less that you as an individual company will produce. So let's say in the market of acoustic guitars, you have the three giants, which are Taylor, Martin, and Gibson. So it's because there's three of them, they're each making, let's just say in theory, a third of the acoustic guitars in the entire market. So if one of them shuts down for some reason, a third of the acoustic guitars in the entire market will be lost, and they'll have a decrease in supply because a third of the guitars are gone. Whereas if there was just one and they were producing 100%, if they went out of business, all of it would be gone. So that's how number of sellers works. And what it looks like on a graph is you'll have the supply going from lowest to highest, from left to right. And if there's an increase, it's going to move to the right, which looks like that. And if there's a decrease, it's going to move to the left, which looks like that. So let's say that that there's a new machine that makes guitars instantly, and they can have a supply surge. It's going to increase and go that way. Whereas if the input prices for wood goes it just skyrockets up for some reason, and they can't afford to make as many guitars, the supply is going to decrease, which goes to the left. So now we're going to talk about the shifters of demand. There are five shifters. There's income, prices of related goods, tastes, expectations, and number of buyers. And if you follow me over here in the squiggly to this, income. So income is the amount of spendable, it's just the amount of spending you can do in a certain time period. So when you're talking about income, there are two things that go hand in hand with it, which are normal goods versus inferior goods. And what normal goods are is as your income increases, the demand for these goods is going to increase because they're higher quality goods and they're not as cheaply made, so you may not be able to afford them when your income is low, but as your income gets higher and you can afford them, that's what you'll move on to. Whereas inferior goods, as the income increases, these goods decrease in demand because they're not as good as goods, but you can afford them if you don't have the money or the spendable income. So then you have the second shifter demand, which is prices of related goods. And if you follow this squiggly, it leads over to these two things, which are substitute goods and complement goods. So a substitute good is, for example, for my company, which is Martin, if there is an increase in price of a acoustic guitar from Martin, there'll be an increase in demand for a substitute good such as a keyboard from Yamaha. It's cheaper than this acoustic guitar, and therefore more people can afford it and are willing to buy it. So all a substitute good is an increase in price of one, such as a guitar, leads to an increase in demand for the other, such as the keyboard. But you also have complement goods, where an increase in the price of one leads to a decrease in demand for the other. So if you have a guitar and its complement goods would be a strap or strings or a pick or a case or an amp or something like that, and you have an increase in price for guitar and you can't afford a guitar, that gives you no reason to buy a pick because you don't have a guitar. There'll be a decrease in demand for that pick. So that's how it works in relation to Martin. The third shifter of demand is tastes, and it's kind of hard to talk about on a whole market scale because we don't have everyone's individual preferences pinpointed out. It's really difficult, but just think of it like the more you like something, the more you're gonna buy of it. Like I play guitar, so I would buy more guitar-related goods or guitars, whereas my mom, who's filming this right now, doesn't play guitar, doesn't like guitar. She would never buy one. She would never buy one. Ever.
I would buy one for you.
That's not even true either. But to explain taste a little bit better, let's say you have someone like, let's say you have an artist that you're influenced by or you like them. You may be more apt to buy something that they use. Like, let's say you have someone like John Mayer, who's a great blues guitarist and a kind of a poppy singer, but that's okay. Or you have someone like James Hetfield, who's the lead singer and rhythm guitarist for Metallica. John Mayer uses a Martin OC acoustic guitar, a Fender Strat, and a PRS Silver Sky, and those are all his signature guitars, whereas James uses this ESP Explorer type guitar. But if you like John Mayer more than you like James Hetfield, you would buy any of those John Mayer guitars over that one James Hetfield guitar. So that's kind of how taste works. It's like, why would you buy vanilla ice cream if you like chocolate? Doesn't make any sense. The next shifter of demand is expectations, which is kind of tricky to talk about, but basically, if let's say you have a 2-month period where you get paid each month, so there's two different incomes coming in, or there's two different sets, so there's one income for the first month and one income for the second one. In the first month, let's say you don't have enough income to buy a whole guitar, you only have like $200 of spendable income. You're not going to be able to buy a nice guitar for yourself from Martin, but let's say the next month you have $600 of spendable income. You could buy a beginner, fairly nice guitar. Then you may be more apt to spend that money the first month rather than save it or spend it on a guitar because you can't buy as good of a product, or you have other things you might want to purchase instead for that price. And the fifth shifter is the number of buyers. And this one's pretty straightforward. If you have an all acoustic guitar band where there's 5 members, everyone needs a guitar, you're going to buy 5 acoustic guitars. Let's say they're from Martin in this example. Whereas you have one guy, one guitar, you're only going to buy one acoustic guitar from Martin. So if there's more people buying this good, there's going to be an increase in demand. So how demand is written on a graph, it's going from highest to lowest, left to right, and a decrease will be a shift to the left, and an increase will be a shift to the right. Very similar to supply, except for one is going from highest to lowest, one is going from lowest to highest. And let's say, for example-wise, let's say that we're talking about Stevie Ray Vaughan's signature Strat, and you happen to really like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Let's say you're part of some weird cult that really likes Stevie Ray Vaughan, and decides to form a Stevie Ray Vaughan super mega cover band with 80, 100 people. I don't know, something stupid like that. Let's say that you all need to buy this Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat. There's going to be a huge increase in demand for it, so it's going to shift to the left. But let's say that you go for numbers of buyers. Let's use that as an example. You have a band. There's 5 people. Let's talk about that 5-man acoustic band from earlier. 4 of them die. They get dysentery. It's unfortunate, Oregon Trail style, and they fall off the wagon, and you're the only one left. And you have to buy a new guitar because your guitar got pooped on by the guys that had dysentery. So that's going to be you're still buying 1, but you're not buying 5. So that's a decrease in demand. There's not as many people to buy that good. Whereas we'll do some examples for shifters of supply. If there is let's say you're a company and you just got this machine to, I don't know, string the guitar instantly, so you can ship it with strings on it, and that's actually increasing the amount of strings out there and the amount of guitars out there, because it takes shorter to produce it, and you're making more of them, so that'll be an increase. So it's going to shift to the left. Or let's say that all the wood for your fretboard, which is, I think for Martin it's usually like an ebony, usually from Madagascar or Brazil, either one of those, rosewood or ebony. Let's say that both those things get super expensive, which they both are super expensive, but they get more expensive, and you can't produce as many guitars because you need the fretboard wood in order to resonate. That's going to be a decrease in supply because you can't produce as many guitars. So that is the shifters of demand, shifters of supply,